Welcome, gamers, to the start of a new Let's Play series. My name is Daz Tactic. This is Warhammer 40,000 Gladius Relics of War. This is the brand new DLC, the Adeptus Mechanicus DLC. I'll be going through in depth how these all sort of work. But I'm going to go through, like, if you're trying to evaluate how to play a particular faction, and I've got to say, Adeptus Mechanicus is not for the faint of heart. It's a very difficult faction to play. There's a lot of nuance to playing it, which is a really cool, and that's the reason that it's so good, is because if you're a bit of a veteran of this particular game, you're going to love the challenge that this presents to you, and you're going to love the opportunities for, you know, having some really amazing units as you sort of get into the mid game. The early game is going to be a real struggle, I can tell you that. This is a hard faction to play, but very rewarding. It's one of these factions where some of the factions are difficult in a weak way that sort of annoys you, but this one's weak in a way that actually is quite inspiring. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. One of the ways I think of evaluating any faction, no matter what it is to go to the compendium, which you'll sort of see back over here. Sorry, there it is. I'll just move that one back there. F1. So I'll just press F1. And I always like to go to the buildings as my starting place. And so go to buildings and then go to whichever faction you're wanting to play. Now, I've got a few mods installed. By the way, if you do want to get my mod list, it is actually available on Steam. If you go to the Steam workshop and just search for Daz Tactic, you'll find a collection of the different mods that I have installed. I've got a fair few, maybe 10 or 11. I think there's quite a few mods installed. So anyway, we're going to be looking at Adeptus Mechanicus. Let's just talk a little bit about the backstory. This is actually very well written and explains a lot as to what the motivations are, how things work, and so I'll talk a little bit about how this actually does work. So Adeptus Mechanicus, I won't go through this bit of flavour text in through here. So you are the Adeptus Mechanicus, the cult of the machine god, have worshipped the Omnissiah long before the Imperium came to your world of Mars. All right, let's talk about that sentence. There's a lot going on in that sentence. So the Adeptus Mechanicus is essentially the cult of the machine god. We worship machines, and the Omnissiah essentially is considered to be like the machine god, essentially. It is sort of the way that we would look at that. And so the Adeptus Mechanicus, as humans, have actually been worshipping this particular machine god, you know, since before the Imperium really came into power. And you can see they came to your world of Mars. Now, what actually happened was the Imperium set up on Earth, and the Adeptus Mechanicus were then operating from Mars. They were sort of twin colonies. They did work together in a awkward sort of way, I guess, is sort of the way you'd maybe look at that. I don't want to spend too much time with that one, but on Mars was really where all of the big machines and things were built for the Imperium. And so that was actually sort of what the Mars connection was. So Adeptus Mechanicus, their home world is Mars. So following his edict, you have never doubted or ceased to pursue your calling, to gather knowledge and to employ it to gather more. And so what they do here is they protect the knowledge that they have. They're pretty much the only group in the galaxy from the Imperium side that can look after the big machines and keep them, I guess, sort of, you know, operational. So that's sort of really what one of their big callings is, to make sure that they do look after the big robots, the heavy equipment, even farming equipment. They look after everything that's anything to do with machinery for the Imperium. But they're following not the Emperor as such, but the Omnissiah, who is still there's the Imperial connection, but they don't. Like if they feel that the Omnissiah is directing them in an opposite direction from the Imperium, they will follow the Omnissiah, not the Emperor. So where are we up to? Yep. So in pursuit of that, you built the devices and machines that enabled the Imperium to conquer the galaxy 10,000 years ago and maintain it today. And so this is what they do. They look after the machinery. So Gladius Prime was your planet more than it was the Imperium's. What Hive World was not. Okay, Gladius Prime is the reason the game is called Gladius is because this is a battle for Gladius Prime. Now, Gladius, if you don't know the backstory of Gladius itself, the reason we can have so many different factions come in and they sort of work separately, and you have like Tyranids come in and actually be part of the actual planet itself without needing to go back to a superior hive mind. Like, for example, the Tyranids are your sort of almost like your dinosaur type sort of creatures that, you know, and they belong to a hive mind who controls everything to do with all of the Tyranids, no matter where they are in the galaxy. But on Gladius Prime, Gladius itself is wrapped in a warp core, and they're separate. So even the Tyranids actually have a different sort of way of playing where they don't have that outer connection. They have an inner connection. Now, how did that happen? How did that come about? It happened because the Adeptus Mechanicus was using Gladius for experimentation, and so they sort of built the warp core, I believe, or maybe we don't know that yet. But anyway, so that's just speculation. But they were actually experimenting on the Tyranids, as an example, on the actual planet itself. But even more ancient than that, you had the Necrons that were buried under the soil. There's all these different things that were happening on this particular Gladius world that was wrapped inside its warp core. You know, the Orcs arrived, they sort of crashed their ships into it. The Space Marines have arrived. So everyone's arrived on Gladius Prime, but they're locked away inside this warp field. And so no one can really sort of get back out of it. So now it's just a massive battle for the actual planet itself, where nobody really has any sort of overlords. It's everyone's in it for themselves, which is why the game sort of works, and that's sort of the backstory of the actual game itself. But it started with the Adeptus Mechanicus using it as an experimentation world. So it was little effort to hide the Adeptus Mechanicus research into the Tyranids here in a facility deep beneath the Ashen Wastes. So this is sort of like the backstory, is that we were experimenting on the Tyranids, but we brought a lot of the Adeptus Mechanicus equipment with us. And that's why when you actually look at what goes on the actual surface of the planet itself, you'll find the Castellan robots, for example, if you've played the game. It's like big, powerful robots that are just wandering around in the middle of the wastes. Now, we can make use of them because they're part of Adeptus Mechanicus, so we can take them back over and have them come back into our faction. So anyway, we'll continue on. Now, however, your facility has been compromised. Your Skitarii forces scattered and your subjects have escaped. You must rebuild, recover, and take Gladius's prime secrets for your own. For you have a mission to fulfill from the Omnissiah himself. So that's why, even though we're part of the Imperium, no problem fighting other Space Marines, any of the other Imperium forces. Not a worry. We can do that because we're now under higher direction. The Omnissiah is now directing us to go back and retake Gladius for the Adeptus Mechanicus. So that's sort of how that one does work. Now that's just the backstory. So I hope I've explained that well. On Mars itself, if you look at any of the maps of the Adeptus Mechanicus for Mars, you'll sort of find things very, very neatly laid out on the actual surface of the planet. And so that's a big factor of what we have to do when we play as Adeptus Mechanicus as well. We need to structure our cities in such a way that they specialise. Each tile has to specialise. And that makes it quite complex to plan your cities. So just be aware, again, if you're a new player to the game, I would not suggest that you play Adeptus Mechanicus. But if you're a veteran of the game, you're going to love it because it's going to stretch your thinking in other ways. Your strategic planning will be stretched just with the way that the game actually does present itself, which is fantastic. Now, as far as the different city buildings are concerned, if we start to have a look at a few of these, there's a few different buildings that we do actually get. If we talk about, we'll just go to the basic one. So the Genitor Caropradium is the first building that we have available to us for building units. And what this one does is it produces infantry as well as generates food or an influence. And it's always good to just have a bit of a look to see what the progression is for the suggested progression, I guess, from the game's perspective as to what you might be looking to build. Now, we start off with a unit called the Skitarii Vanguards. I like to always look at the upkeep pretty much more than anything else. So this one here has got an upkeep of 1.5. So it's a very, very basic unit and it uses food. I'd like to see what the building costs are, ore and food to build it, upkeep of food. Next one across is actually a hero unit. This is the Skitarii Marshal. And so this one actually uses influence and food. Again, fairly low level. The heroes are not strong heroes. They're not your orc heroes or your Tyranid heroes that can do a lot of damage. They really control the groups around them. They're much more about controlling machinery than about actually being badasses, I guess, in what they actually get up to. We then actually have another one through here, the Cerberus Sulphur Hounds. We'll talk about these as we go through. 2 upkeep. These are really cool units, I've got to say. We'll have a look at those when we get to them in the game itself. These are our attack units. These are very hard to play with, these Scutarii Vanguards, but they're our basic infantry, so we're going to have to make use of them. There's a very particular way to play with those. Then we go a bit further on, the Sicarian infiltrators. We have the Pteraxii Sterilizers. These are jump infantry with that can burn things out. Again, only 3 upkeep, so it's all pretty cheap, when we look at this. And then finally we have the Cataphron destroyers. So and you'll see that this is a Canticles of Omnissiah infantry unit. The others, I think, are all Doctrina Imperatives. Doctrina. Yeah, so these are all Doctrina. That's the only one that is a Canticles of Omnissiah infantry unit with devastating anti-armor weaponry. And that one does cost a fair bit. So that's going to be a mid to late game before we can sort of get that one. But none of our infantry is world beating. They're all pretty weak. Just be aware of that. Next building that we'll have a look at is the Manufactorum Cybernetica. This one in through here. And so what this one does, produces our ground vehicles as well as generates food, ore, and influence. And so when we have a look at this one, we have our starting unit, as soon as we build this, is we can then get these Iron Strider Ballistariuses. And we can have a look at this in a little bit. This is only 1.5 ore upkeep. So it's important to now know, okay, we need ore. We need 30 ore to build one of these, and then it's an upkeep of 1.5. Beyond that, we then have the Scorpius Dune Rider, which is a transport vehicle. As you can see, Doctrina Imperatives. Back through here, this is a Canticles of Omnissiah Combat Walker. These are the Castellan robots that we will find on the actual surface. We can build them ourselves. The upkeep difference, though, is these are all upkeeps of ore. This one uses energy for its upkeep, and it uses a bit of energy to build it as well. Then we actually have another ore upkeep. This is the Onager Dune Crawler. So Doctrina Imperatives. It's just important to know what group they're from, what strata of society they're from the Astra Militarum. It's not the Astra Militarum, the Adeptus Mechanicus. I'm going to keep on doing that. Sorry, guys. I'll apologise in advance. The Scorpius Disintegrator, so powerful Doctrina Imperatives frontline tank unit back in through there. And then finally, the Supreme of the Supreme, 12 upkeep in ore. This is the Night Crusader, so a super heavy walker unit with an endless array of deadly ranged weapons. So this is the big guy. The big guy basically towards the end of the game will be bringing these out. These will be sort of like super destructive with what they can actually then do. So this is really the core of what our fighting will be. The infantry are okay, but they're nothing like what we have in through here. Like once we get to Castellan robots, we can get them relatively early, and they will then start to dominate the battlefield as long as we've got support. Okay, let's talk about the support. Support around these units comes from the subcloister, and so building that produces tech priests as well as increases population limit and loyalty. And so what this one does, you've got production of 6. For the actual building of the units themselves, and it's just got 1 extra population limit and 1 extra loyalty. Now what this one does is it introduces the Cybernetica data smiths, which I'll talk a little bit about when we go onto the game world. By the way, this is going to be an episode 0 where I just do an introduction to the actual DLC. So this will be we won't be really playing much. So sorry if you've been watching me rabbit on about all sorts of different things up until now and wondering when I'm going to get into actual gameplay. That will be in the next episode, pretty much. I mean, I'll do a little bit. I'll set up the city and talk a little bit about the cities. I'll talk a little bit about the background as to the actual of the DLC, what makes it different to the other things. So this is a Canticles of Omnissiah infantry unit that repairs Adeptus Mechanicus units, reprograms Castellan robots, clears tiles, and founds new cities. Very important unit. It's not just a builder of cities. Now, there are a lot of support units like this for the other factions. This, I think, is the most valuable of those support type units. I can't think of any other faction where the unit that can build the cities can actually do as much good and as much support, because it really is a healer unit as well as a general support unit. Then we have a couple of heroes. So we actually have, this is the Tech Priest Manipulus back in through here. So this is the Canticles of Omnissiah hero unit with powerful support abilities and neutralizing effects. Again, it's more of a healer type unit. Then we actually have the the Tech Priest Dominus, so self-reliant Canticles of Omnissiah hero unit with a scouting ability and damage buffs. This is probably our most powerful unit, to be honest. It does cost a lot, and it's got like an upkeep of 4 food, but certainly worth sort of going for when we can actually get it in through there. So that will be a good unit for us to get in. That's probably our main combat hero unit. And then finally, we actually have the Fugitive Electro Priests. So the Canticles of Omnissiah melee infantry unit that increases its damage reduction by killing units. And so this again is sort of like, these are all support style units, and you can see again we've gone away from what we were sort of seeing with the others, with this Doctrina Imperatives. So these are all in the other faction. I mean, this is also part of that Canticles of Omnissiah as well, like the Castellan robots. They're sort of part of the inner circle as such, but the Castellan robots sort of do the biddings of the Tech Priest Engineers that we sort of see in through here. So this is now a whole class of Tech Priests that we actually have in through this side. Other areas we can have a look at, we have I don't think there's much else there. That's just going to, this is just how we build things. Here we go. This is our flying units. We've got very limited flying units. So building that produces aircraft as well as generates food or an influence. And so there's only 2 craft that we actually have in this faction. We've got an Archaeopter Transvector, which is a Doctrina Imperatives flying transport unit. So it's got 3 ore upkeep. And then the combat unit that we actually have is the Doctrina Imperatives flying combat unit for 6 energy. So most of what we use is using ore. All the buildings will actually have, like if I go to anything through here, for example, this is how we get food. The ferrotonic furnaces will have an upkeep. They've all got an upkeep of energy. So energy is important, ore is important, food is important. You can sort of see that combination. Depending on which direction we go, we need to sort of know what resources we need to be fostering. Now, I'm thinking I'm sort of stretched a little bit between going straight for the infantry, where I'm going to then have a lot of food that's going to be required, even though I've got fairly weak sort of units initially, and also then going to the Manufactorum Cybernetica, or straight to the Subcloister in through here, and just get this one in so to get the extra loyalty, the population limit, and have the ability to build a second city as fast as possible. I'm stretched a little bit with this as to which way to go. I don't know. I don't know at this stage which way I want to go with that. Let's get into the actual game itself, now that we've had a bit of a rundown of the different units that we actually have available to us. This is the force that we actually have here on the world. And so we've got our basic unit in through here is the Scutarii Vanguards. And these are probably the weakest of the early infantry units of any faction in the game. They're bionic, which does give them some benefits. But they've only got like 2 armor. They've got 2 armor with a bit of a bonus. They also have bionics, and bionics gives them 17% invulnerable damage reduction. And when I hover over armor, you'll see it there at the bottom. So it's got 16.7 armor damage reduction for the 2 armor, plus a 17% invulnerable damage reduction. So in essence, it sort of works like 4 armor with having that bionics as well. So you sort of add that one onto it. So each point of armor reduces damage taken by approximately 8.3%. The difference with the invulnerable damage reduction is that even keeps out armor penetration. So armor penetration is not going to get through the invulnerable damage reduction. It's only the armor damage reduction that will sort of be then knocked back. But it is still very, very weak. Even at 4 armor, it's not really all that good. And 10 hit points is really, really poor. So that's a very, very poor amount of life force that it actually does have. And also rounding out its problems is that it actually has this particular radium carbine. And the biggest problem with this one is it's only range 1. But it does actually have some extra benefits. It does radiation poisoning against infantry and monstrous creature units. So it's very good against infantry as long as it can get the first shot. That's really critical, because if it gets shot, it's dead. Basically, if there's a full unit that comes up against this one, where this one doesn't have some sort of protection, it's gone. And so to get with a range 1 ranged unit, we have to draw units into it, or we have to engage them with other units and then bring these forward to then finish them off. They're glass cannons, They're very, very weak if they take damage, but they can do a fair amount of damage because of the radiation poisoning. They only do 1 damage for each shot. They have 3 shots with their guns, and there's 5 units. So there's 15 damage essentially would be done by these guys at level 1. Armor penetration is only 1, so it's very, very weak against armoured units, and its accuracy is 8, so 67% in through there. And as I say, the range 1 makes this a very, very weak unit, a very difficult unit to know how to play. So just be aware of that. If you are playing this one, these require some nuance in the way that you actually approach it. It's not like the Space Marines, for example, have got a range of 2, so you can sort of sit back and do what you need to do. These are difficult, very, very difficult. Make one little wrong move with these, and they're completely destroyed. So don't get attached to the Scutarii Vanguards. The unit behind there is the Cybernetica Datasmith. Now this has changed in the game. Castellan robots that are wild in the game will actually now have these guys rather than the Tech Priest Engine Seers. They've sort of been demoted down to Cybernetica Datasmiths, which are sort of like the entry-level Tech Priests. And so, but these are quite cool. And so these units, as we saw in the descriptions, can actually take over the Castellan robots that they find. If they do find them, they can take them over with their, with this particular control, with their, the Omniscion aspect of this particular support unit. It also does limited hit point, like it can give hit points back to the other units, which is actually very, very good. Like it's only 6, but it's enough, it's enough to help. And so having these, as I say, are quite valuable support units. They also have all sorts of little benefits themselves. They actually pack quite a punch, particularly against armoured units. So whereas these are good against infantry if they can get the first shot, this unit is actually good against armour. And so it's got a 3 damage, only 1 attack, armor penetration 8 though, gamma pistol. And this is an armor bane, so increases the armor penetration. And so it's an assault classification. It's only range 1. This one, the data spike, is a damage 1.5, attacks 1.3, armor penetration of 0. So not really anything there, but it does have the trait of haywire. Increases the damage and ignores armor against vehicles and fortifications. So even though the armor penetration is 0, if it can get past the accuracy of 50%, it's going to do some damage with the haywire. So that could be useful. I mean, this is still a support unit, so I don't think it's a world beater. And then finally, we have the old Power Fist, the melee unit there with the high armor penetration. So this certainly changes things. It does have a special ability, like it's only got 6 hit points. 10 armor is really quite cool. And you'll sort of see when I hover over that one, it's got like a 83.3% armor damage reduction, but then another 33% feel no pain damage reduction and a 33% invulnerable damage reduction. And so these are shown through here. Feel no pain increases the damage reduction by 33%, and another one, refractor field. So even though it's only got 6 hit points, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for units to damage that. So again, a really, really valuable unit. So let's now just go and work out how we're going to build our cities. The cities are really, really interesting. So let's just talk a little bit about the strategy of where to sort of set them up. Now, I've got 2 different strategies essentially that I can take with each city that I build. I can either go for the machinery, or I can go with infantry. And so I've got to sort of make that choice a little bit based on what I find on the actual world itself. You can see we've got a lot of volcanic in through here, which gives me a lot of ore. So you can see 40% ore at this location back in through here as an example, which is quite a valuable one. 20% in through there. We've got influence down this side. In fact, if you go Control Z, you can then see the overlay of all the different benefits that you can see. Now, we don't want to go to anything with anything negative at all for our start location. We've got food way over here. We've got research in here, which is very, very valuable as well to us. If I started here, I'd end up with research. Sorry, I'd end up with research right here. If I go there, I end up with food, research, and ore. And then I've got ore around me. I don't get the 40% though for late game. And I would like to get that one fairly early. I'm thinking if I start here, I can ultimately end up over there, and I can still get to the research. So I could start here and then move across. I don't want to go to the negatives back in through this side. It's between these 2 here for me. at this early stage. Actually, that's not bad over there. No, it's still got negative food. The food is still important. I don't want to have a negative with these. I've got to really think through what I want for my city. And I think, like looking at all the negative food that we have all the way through here, I don't think there's anything else in here that I would be wanting to go for. I mean, there's 20% food. There is some research back in through there as well. One thing you'll notice as well, there's a 4. We haven't seen this before. We've only ever seen 3s. And so when we have a look at some of these, we'll find there are some 3s. But usually the open areas like this would only have 3. And then the closed areas, like with the rocks, would then only have 2. This is one of the differences playing as the what is it called again? The Adeptus Mechanicus. I keep on thinking of the Astra Militarum. The Adeptus Mechanicus. And so this is, they can build more on each tile, but they have negatives with how you approach it. And I'll talk about that in just a second. I'm thinking here. Thinking here for the simple reason, now one thing we don't have, we've got energy back over there. Now we can always get a second city somewhere else as well. I think we'll, oh God, which way? I keep screwing this up. I mean, if I go there, I can get food. If I go here, I've got a little bit of food there if I wanted to, but it's not much. Look, I'll just set up here, I think. So I'll set up right where I actually am. So I'm just going to go and press Control Z again, and we'll just go and found a city. In fact, it's suggesting back over here, but this is negative food. I don't want that. I'm just going to go here. So we'll select this target and build our first city there. So Relaloris, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that word, so I'm just going to go back in here and just rename it to Dasburg. I can't think of anything else for now. This is Dasburg, our capital. It's got population 1 of 6, so we can sort of see the way it's sort of working. So back in through here, with the benefits that we actually have of the extra food, the extra ore, we are picking up a little bit of extra ore there from the features. You can see there 0.4, and the food as well. We're just going to get a little 0.2 extra for the food in through there as well, but not very much. And the Forge Temple will also then give us a little bit of a boost along in those 2 areas. We won't get the same boost for energy, research, or anything else along those lines. Now, what I probably want to be building pretty early is actually getting my research up and running. I'm getting +6 at the moment from this particular building, and I do need to get this one get on top of this. And the only place I have is a 20% research back into this site. So let's just go ahead and acquire that particular tile. So we'll just go with that one to start with. And so that will be the first building that I'm going to be building. And I'm thinking that that's probably the best way to go playing as these guys. You could go with the building here, the Genitor Carpopradium, if you are wanting to have get more infantry out if you're wanting to do that. But again, you're then going to need to have a lot of food, and so you're going to have to really then focus on getting your food under control. Now we've taken over the fermentation pool. I'm just going to now move these guys out and just take. We can see we're at the bottom end of the map, like over through here. Be interesting to see who's behind us, or down the bottom through there. We've got a Jacero Trader's Hut, which will give us influence, which isn't really one of the resources I really want urgently. I'm looking for either food or ore. Let's just go down and grab that one. Okay, we're sort of not seeing much. Now, it's always a bad idea to move your forces away from their own support. But in this case, I know that there's a webway gate there, which won't be able to attack. There's ruins back through that side. We should be okay just by moving across to there. Okay, we've got ourselves some neophyte hybrids back over this side. Now, they've got a range of 2, unfortunately, which has then sort of damaged us a fair bit, 2.9. This is where we're very, very squishy. So that's a bit of a shame. So they've got an auto gun, which does, now they can do rapid fire, which doubles the attack at half range. They could almost kill us off if they move in close. Now, we can't move out to them. I'm thinking they're probably going to stay where they are and shoot. And I'm going to have to now run away because I just can't contend with that with this particular unit. This is such a weak unit. So we'll just order our units back into here. I'm not going to do anything because what I want to do is if it does come close to me, I'll be able to get a first shot in and then then destroy that one. So I'm just going to go and hold position until healed at this stage. We'll now choose our research. Now the research, and we'll finish this episode off here, I think, where we just sort of talk a little bit about what to look for. Now, I'm going to be focusing on the Manufactorum because I'm going to be able to get ore. So the Manufactorum Cybernetica will give me the ground units. So I want to get that one pretty much right from the very, very start. So let's go and start that way. But if we have a bit of a look, the progression I want to go through is I want to sort of be moving down. I want to get the Tech Priest Manipulus. I want to get the actually Subcloister probably next with the Tech Priests as well. So they start to sort of come through. The Castellan robots in through there. The increasing the loyalty will be very, very important to us. And then moving out through here, the Mavra forming. I'll show you this actually in the coming in the next episode as to why this is important. And then moving on beyond that, even we then sort of start to look at some of the important things that we're going to need, like where do we want to go? I mean, once we sort of get past there, we're then looking at very, very sort of, I guess we're looking at sort of like the mid game by this stage. And it takes a long time before we start to then even get our different flying combat units. I think we get another one of those. Where do we get those first of all? There we go. So tier 7 is when we start to get the flying units. But it's very, very interesting. It's sort of like one of these things. I think getting the Castellan robots, if we're going to go the robot way, is going to be like if we're going to go with the Manufactorum more so than the infantry, then it's important that we go for the Castellan robots fairly quickly. We are going to need the Subcloister, though, to bring in the support units for the robots. If we went the other way, where we actually sort of more chose the infantry, we would then be looking to get these Sulphur Hounds, which are very, very cool units. They're sort of like assault infantry. They're great little units, actually, along with the Hero Marshal. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave this episode here. I'm just going to click on OK. It's sort of the end of the turn. This is a massive map that we're playing on, by the way, a gigantic map, so it's going to take some time to get through this. I will catch you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.